This is the second part of how to create a flowchart for a Yahtzee game. And if you have seen the number 1 tutorial, then you should have all of this in Publisher or at least following along with me. So basically, we have started our program, which we're going to call Yahtzee. We have displayed out to the user welcome and given them option to either play, get direction, or quit. And we have handled all 3 of those options as far as the flowchart is concerned. So now we have rolled 5 dice. We're going to use an array for the rolled number. And we've asked the user, would you like to roll all the dice again, or keep some of the dice, or keep all of the dice? So this is where we left off, and we begin by, I'm going to handle option 1 first. So I'm going to copy, Control-C, Control-V, this text box that's up here, and place it down so we can take an arrow and connect one box to the other. And I'm going to copy the one we placed up here and paste it down here. Alright, so if my user after 1 roll decides that they would like to roll all the dice again, option 1, they will go to this scenario, which will be, I'm going to tell them you chose to roll all dice again. And spread out my text box just a little more so it fits all nice and neat. And I'm going to display their new dice. So again, I symbolized the 5 dice with just 5 spaces. Of course, they will be randomly random number generator. So once I've displayed that, I'm in red going to give myself a programming note that we described in the key and say increment the roll number, which we're going to store in location 0 as roll 2. Therefore, after we've incremented, we're going to ask the user again, well, the same thing that's over here. Would you like to? And giving them these options again. So it's just simple copy and paste, which is why doing this on a computer can be fast. And I'm actually going to move this box over just a little bit more so I can fit another text box in on the side. And if I can get this one to move down, we'll move on. Then copy and paste another text box. And I'm actually going to handle the easiest scenario as far as just rolling all 5 dice again. And that's actually, again, option number 1. At this point, I'm going to display to the user, again, you choose to roll all dice again. And I'm going to give them a display of all the dice. Then I am going to increment again, so I'm not going to type this again. I'm just going to copy and paste. Need my I included. And I'm going to make sure that that was roll 3. Again, location 0 in my array that holds these 5 dice will be incremented. And once that gets to 3, or when I'm incrementing, it equals 3, then I need to tell the user that there's no more rolls, or I'm just going to simply output to the user their total so that they can decide what to do with their total. Now in Yahtzee, there is a game board that You can have a full house and 3 of a kind and 4 of a kind. We will need to handle that. However, as far as this is concerned, this just top layer of the flowchart, I'm just going to ask the user, where would you like to store your total? And then I'm going to give myself a programming note that I actually need to deal with displaying the board. So I'm going to display the board, and I'm going to verify the user's selection. If they chose to use a full house, I need to check that they actually have a full house. Maybe our initial attempt, we just assume we have a smart user, but we need to at least include that in our flowchart so we can deal with that later. And I'm going to say go back to the initial role for next player. And I'm going to actually add an additional box to my key, and I'm going to make it green. And so I can format my auto shape and fill it with a green. And that looks good enough. Take this text box, drag down just a little, and so this is going to symbolize going to the next player. So go to next player. Basically, everything that I have done for player number 1, I would need to do for player number 2 and player number 3. I may want to set up a actual loop that will do this, but for now, for flowchart purposes, I'm just going to put a green box so that I know I have to deal with that, and that's where it would come into play. So I have handled if my user decides to play Yahtzee, roll all the dice, and then roll all the dice again. And I give them their total, and they move on. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit and pull this down so we can add some more options. So what happens if I'm going to deal with the option that once my user decides to play Yahtzee, then they get all 5 and say they actually have Yahtzee, and they want to keep all those dice. So here's a text box, just copied and pasted, and an arrow. And you know what, I'm actually going to move this over just a little bit further and get an arrow. And that is option 3. And so they chose option 3. They're going to keep all the dice. Basically, I will output their dice total and ask them the same thing that I asked them over here. Where would you like to store it? And then give myself some programming notes. Again, just copying and pasting. I'm going to move my text box over. I'm going to put a green dot, because once this is complete, then I need to repeat for another player. So then, well, what if I've rolled all the dice again, which would put me down to this box, and then decided to keep all the dice here? Well, it would be the same output as if I were here. So I'm just going to simply put an arrow, and this would be option 3. Again, why I like using publisher. Easier to put. And once I've gotten to this point, I've handled options 1 and 3. Now I have to handle option 2. So I'm going to copy and paste the text box, put that all the way down here, put my arrow so that I know where I'm going, And I know I have a 2 around here somewhere. And the option 2 there. So I'm going to keep some of the dice. The tricky thing with keeping some of the dice is it could be my user would want to keep die 1, 3, and 5, or 2 and 4. So I need to handle that. The neat thing, because of the way that we're setting up our rolling number of die with location 1 in the array being actual die 1, if the user puts in they want to keep die 1, we just simply put whatever's in that location into, my suggestion would be a completely different array, and we can tally them up as we go. So with that being said, what would we put in a flowchart? I'm going to put a note out to the user. What numbers would you like to keep? And maybe we decide to, what dice numbers would you like to keep? And maybe we tell them, maybe we need to actually output die 1, die 2, die 3, die 4, die 5. We can handle that when we get to the code. And I'm going to also put out to the user, type 0 when finished. That way, I will know, since they didn't choose die 1 through 5, since it was 0, my user is done telling me which ones they want to keep. And I'm going to need to increment how many times I rolled the dice, and this will actually be roll 2. And I'm going to give myself some more programming notes. So I'm going to say, I need to get an array to store the kept dice. And at this current moment, I think I'm actually going to call that array kept dice. But for now, we'll just leave it like this. And I'm going to tally the number of kept dice, and then I'm going to random generate new dice that will be how many I stored in there. Then I need to display, I'll get some spaces in here. I'm going to display the new dice to the user. So basically, I'm going to give them 5 dice. I'm going to have to keep if my user decided to keep 3 dice, I'm going to have to output those 3 and then add on 2 randomly generated dice. So once that happens, I need to ask them again, what would you like to do? And I'm going to actually copy and paste from up here. And okay, the autoflow, I can actually handle that myself, so I'm going to say no. So that's handled. I've got my start. I chose 1, 2, or 3. And from this block, the first roll, I have given options 1, 2, and 3. I still need to handle some more options. I need to handle this option 2. And I need to handle the options in the other, in this section too. I'll need to handle all 1, 2, and 3 again. So please continue and look for tutorial number 3.